What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video, and today we're going to be bringing you the top 41 corners in the 2025 NFL Draft. If you are new, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. You guys know how to use YouTube. Would love for you guys to stick around because we make content like this almost every single day. I try to every single day, but we do it a minimum of 5 times a week. So if you guys like draft content, this is the place to be. Let's get on into this because it's going to be a very long one. I'm going to be reading a scouting report from a single game for every single one of these players. So stay tuned for that. Staying hydrated today. We're actually doing something that technically dehydrates you, but coffee is going to be the way to go because we're both going to need it, okay? You get some free ASMR in there as well. But before we get actually jumping into these players, I want to be able to give you guys a little bit of transparency as to how I grade these specific players. And it's not just a 0 to 100 scale. It is also broken down by tiers, and it's broken down by categories, because I'm not going to pull something out of my ass. And yeah, things can get reshifted as time goes on, but that's just called learning and evolving rather than actually just, bullshitting. So I try to be as transparent as possible. I try to be analytical with it. I also try to use numbers rather than just saying, I think that guy's a top 50 guy. I know a lot of other people do that, and they do a very good job at it. For me, I feel a lot more rooted in being able to reference all these things because it allows me to understand a player far easier, especially after we study 41 of them, by being able to look back and understand their strengths and weaknesses at a quick glance rather than having to, go back and be like, why did I like this player? But so I have different tiers. So I'll have tier 1, which is cornerback 1, which is 80 plus. I think that's fair. 80 plus is usually what I've seen in the past has been a consistent grade of corner 1. Corner 2 is going to be that 75 to 80 territory. That corner 3, that flex option who should be getting some reps in, being in part of that rotation, is 70 to 75. And then you got the developmental guys that are under 70. And technically, you talk about the guys who are under 50, which there aren't going to be any on this, thank God. But those are guys who I don't think have a chance in the NFL. But regardless, how I break these guys down is through man coverage. So that's going to be a combination of both just overall skill, but also just basically how effective are they, how comfortable are they, basically how well do they do in man coverage, right? It's very self-explanatory. Same thing with zone. And the thing about man coverage and zone coverage is that they actually bleed into a lot of the other categories as well. So you'll see most of the time if someone's very good in zone, they have very good instincts. Like that usually means they have a very solid awareness of what's going on around them. But if you see someone with a high zone coverage grade and lower instincts, most likely they're not as good at run support because a lot of times they don't know what's going on outside of the coverage realm. So it certainly works hand in hand with that for man coverage as well. Physicality plays a big portion because the NFL is very physical. Athleticism usually plays a big portion as well. But athleticism, I actually ended up changing this a lot because before I would just pull a number out of my ass, and you guys know me, I don't like doing that. But I actually ended up creating separate categories for both speed as well as acceleration because I think that there's certain players in this class that have really nice top speeds but just can't really get there. Similar to receivers have some good top speeds but maybe not the best acceleration. But I ended up combining those and weighting it properly to be able to give you an athleticism score that's actually rooted not off of my gut feeling, but actually a little bit more of a calculated score. So a lot of people's athleticism's dropped. C is average for those of you who are not comfortable with my grading scale. I'm a little bit of an ass when it comes to that, but that's okay. Change of direction. How fluid are you? It's just basically a test of fluidity. A lot of guys really have a hard time changing, going from north to south, and that's just not going to work in the NFL. But then you got instincts as well. I was talking about this. It's understanding what's going on around you. In zone coverage, do you understand the routes that are developing? When you're playing any sort of coverage, do you know when the running back has the ball versus are you just going to be staring at your receiver the whole time? And there's certain ways to be able to feel for, because it's something that, people like you and me, we don't really have access to fully understanding the systems of colleges. Sometimes they just say, don't even fully ignore the running back. But there's just ways where you can litmus test it overall. Physicality, it's like press coverage. Are you going to be able to use physicality properly? Or are you going to use it to a detriment? Or are you just not strong enough? There are certain players in this class that just don't bring enough physicality to the table to be able to compete with the NFL receivers. And then run support, relatively self-explanatory, but it factors there as well because I want to give credit to those guys who are able, like Travis Hunter, he has a +4. Just spoiler alert, because, well, he actually ends up having one of the best ball skills that you've ever seen. right? And I think that does matter a lot. But also there's guys like Dalen Everett, spoiler alert, who don't look at the ball, but I think they do a very good job everywhere else. Or there's certain guys with height deficiencies where you have to drop them, right? And making a category for frame used to be a great way to be able to boost guys' ratings. I'd rather not do that. So dream fits don't really matter. I know that people are going to say this is way too long of an intro, but I think it matters a lot more for those of you guys who actually really care about why I'm saying certain things rather than just jumping in, because those of you guys who don't want to listen to why I do things, you can hit the skip button. But let's jump into this, starting out with Siobhan Rell. And you might be like, what? He's 42? No, he's not. So let's pump the brakes. Siobhan Rell, you guys know me. I'm not like in cahoots with any of these big organizations. I have 3 sources of all 22 sources. So it's technically black market because it's illegal. It's copyrighted. You can't necessarily post it, promote it, etc. And so that's why I am very limited on what I can watch. And we know Siobhan Rell from 2023. He does have a grade from 2023. But I'm not going to bullshit you guys and say I have an official grade for him because I don't. He injured himself early in the year. Don't have App State tape. I think it's Old Dominion. He also played in some other school. I don't know. It's not out for this year. And I want to give you guys as transparent of a grading system as possible. And I grade only on all 22 tape. And I only grade on 22. He's not 6'1", 182, by the way. This is just a former player. But regardless, Siobhan Rell, he's 6'3", 193. I'm just not going to give you guys a grade on something that I haven't watched. And I hope you guys respect that because I want to keep integrity here. Starting out with 41, these actually first 3 are going to be very controversial. And I really like Tommy Hill coming into the year. I really did. And there's not very many notes for him specifically. We're going to talk about his game versus USC, but I really have seen him slow down. And he has a really good tenacity. That's why I still gave him that +1 on the it factor. But it does kind of bother me. I watched him versus USC, and we'll just read the notes here as well. So versus USC, I literally have 2 lines of notes. That's not a good sign. You know it's a good sign when I have like a shit ton of notes. For the most part, some guys just suck so much that I need to write a lot of notes. But for Tommy Hill, it was pretty noteworthy, less or unnoteworthy. So it started out with him being extremely stiff. He ended up tracking a ball poorly and then had a contested catch over him. I remember this one. He was actually, I believe, on the right sideline comparative to the offense. And he was in zone coverage and just started drifting back. And it's like, cool, you actually saw it. And the ball was thrown. It looked like he was in a good position. He just got absolutely mossed by the receiver behind him. So did not feel that well enough. And ended up, unfortunately, just not doing what he needed to do in the NFL. That's a bench-worthy offense. But he then ended up missing a tackle for a touchdown. I said WTF because it was actually just a really bad one. I actually ended up noting that 7 on the team, Malcolm Hartzog, who's not going to be part of this, but when we do the offseason, we continue adding more guys to it as we know the final group of corners. Malcolm Hartzog comes out, ended up actually noting him as a very good-looking corner. And then I ended up saying my last line. I didn't have really anything else to say. I said he's looking so bad, like UDFA type of bad, which sucks because, again, Tommy Hill is somebody who ended up having that pick 6 versus Shedeur Sanders, ended up having a really hot start to the year. But I don't know if it's injuries or just the fact that he got lucky and off coverage and Shedeur just threw an errant ball in the red zone. But it's starting to feel like that was a little bit of a one-off situation. Tommy did not feel like, and there was the rest of that game there. It's just literally, it could be summed up in the fact that he looked like a UDFA. And corner is an unforgiving position in the NFL. If you're not consistent, you're most likely not going to play. Then Fidel Cyprus, I ended up seeing him in person at SMU, and this is a player who I've been pretty positive about ever since he was at Virginia. But let's look at his notes from Miami. So I instantly noted that he has issues changing directions, not because he is not necessarily fluid, but because he seems to break too far away from the wide receiver, and he has to end up going full throttle out of the break. Bottom line, when he is basically backing up, he's giving way too much room to the receiver. So when the receiver does his break, Fentrell can't actually do a controlled shift from south to north, so to speak. And when he has to do it at full speed, he tends to slip. So that's also why the change of direction is subpar. Remember, C is adequate. Like, we're not saying Fidel Cyprus is ass in every category. Like, he does have some very positive traits to him, but He does give way too much room, and he's not the athlete that will be able to have that acceleration out of the break, so he has to be able to go 100% out of it, and did not do that at the start. He ended up whiffing his hands on a press at the line of scrimmage. He's had some solid man reps down the field. So if you guys also haven't known, I write these notes as if I'm watching the game, so you guys are watching the game with me. This is not designed for you guys to hear every little detail. Like, this is actually a sit-down recountance of the game. Like, these are my in-person, like, as I'm watching notes. So he horribly covered an off man in route that ended up leading to a huge game. I do remember this. He gave way too much room, and then I think he started opening his hips, and the wide receiver just cut under him, and I was like, oh my God. Like, the amount of separation might have been 15 to 20 yards. Like, I have not seen a player perform that poorly in off-man coverage in my entire life. But continuing. So I said he's same for off-man slant. Just do not put this guy in off-man. He doesn't have the acceleration for it. He doesn't have the change of direction. Bottom line is he gives way too much room as well, so he doesn't have that understanding of where he should be. I said, oh my Lord, he ended up whiffing again. So at the line of scrimmage, that's why his physicality is not as high as it should. He tries to use it, and when it works, it's fine, but definitely more nuance there because he needs a lot of development. He ended up being subbed out for the drive after. He ended up getting embarrassed on a double move curl. So if you guys also are not aware, I post all 22 clips on my X page. Feel free to go use the link tree. You're 2 clicks away from that. And that route, that specific play is on there. So you guys can just end up looking up Cyprus or Fentrell. I'm trying to remember because I don't like putting the full name for certain guys I'm like putting a very bad rep on because I don't need those guys, like especially because corner is such a headstrong position. Not really in the mood to like put them down if they're looking themselves up. But regardless, I do have that out there. I especially like to hype up the guys. So I prefer to be more positive than negative. But that specific play was really bad. Like he was put in a spin cycle and did not recover. He does a fine job in press man, but he sucks outside of that in terms of man coverage. The zone coverage was essentially non-existent that game. So bottom line, Fentrell, just, pretty much a non-factor, unfortunately. I got to see him in person as well versus SMU, and I personally did not see anything that would contradict what I saw versus Miami. Then we got Aiden White. So we got 4 dudes that are three dudes, and Tommy Hill, Fentrell Cyprus, and Aiden White that were part of my original group of 27. So I do try to keep the overall analysis a little bit more succinct on these guys because we've already talked about them in depth, but it's 2024 tape. So I still owe you guys a full game. So for Aiden White, I ended up studying his Stanford game. He ended up having a bad game, and I do like to study players' bad games because, well, if you like them when they suck, you're going to like them when they're good. And I think that it's very crucial to understand where their strengths and weaknesses are when they end up getting beat. Because in the NFL, you are going to get beat on certain routes. Nobody is perfect. And if you end up bouncing back or you end up losing valiantly, like Trey Amos that we'll talk about, he'll end up getting a touchdown scored on him, but he's at the catch point. Then it's worth it, right? It's something where it's like, okay, that's almost a positive. Like you fail well. So let's get into this though. He did a solid job staying in position, even though he ended up allowing a catch on a short hitch. His top speed already showed up as an issue. By the way, I have multiple videos out, 2 of them on Aiden White, showing his coverage in off man, and I think it was that hitch route specifically, and then also him getting blown by. He got sat on his butt when he was getting blocked, but it's not necessarily because he's bad. It's just he tends to get pushed on his ass with larger, more physical receivers. He said, nice job in off coverage and short range, but does not take optimal angles. It was a specific slant route that I was talking about there. He ended up going to the receiver's back hip, which the ball was thrown at his front hip. Luckily, it wasn't caught. But continuing. He's doing a solid job versus the run, but he does not hold up well to blockers. Probably doesn't seem to lean well towards the NFL. He ended up getting roasted on a seam by Elik Iomaner. That was the route I ended up posting on X. So again, feel free to check that out. Ended up allowing separation again on a particular in route. He seems to be susceptible to route fakes. That's super crucial. This is actually an issue I have with Jaden Higgins, the wide receiver coming into the year, was that he didn't try to manipulate the defender by, showing an out route and then, breaking, faking in before he goes on a seam, right? There's no route fakes from him, but in the NFL, receivers are really good at that. You look at Cooper Kupp, or Antonio Brown was a perfect example. This is the first time I really understood what a route fake was. He would actually like look left and then, or look right and then cut left, right? And it was just like, oh shit. So the defender instantly sees that you're starting to lean and look, so they break, and then you're breaking the other way. And so in the NFL, a lot of guys do that. And that is a trait of a very good wide receiver. So if you're susceptible and you're gullible, essentially, you're going to get absolutely fucking roasted. But continuing on, the running back ended up getting the edge on him when he was, I think this was where his run support started dropping. He ended up not sealing the edge, and the running back got the edge. Athletic deficiencies are showing up even in the run game. He ended up getting subbed out, not good at all, and clearly show how he will be exposed to the next level. The bottom line is I ended up talking about maybe the Rams being a good team for Aiden White as well. A lot of these guys, you can end up putting them on a multitude of teams, but you know, just being able to mitigate that top speed issue is going to be super crucial, and it might be the reason why Aiden White can't work in the NFL. Continuing on, this is a hot one. A lot of people have Mansour Delan as a first-round pick, so let me get a little bit of coffee, and we'll get into this. There's your free ASMR. So, Mansour Delan, by the way, I have this logo right here. For guys who are injured for the entire season, I should have said this at the beginning, they have that plus, which is why you saw Siobhan Rell have that. I want to be able to show you guys, basically the guys who are hurt. For players who have this recycle logo, it's because they have an extra year of eligibility, and I personally think they should return. They need a little bit more development, and I tried to limit it as much as possible, but there's certain players that either are getting a little bit overhyped, and I think that the hype is necessarily not going to hold up to the elongated offseason process. And Mansour has an extra year. I personally think, especially in this class, he should return and end up actually earning the spot that some people say he has. But there's a lot of guys in this class that I certainly have that concern with. But let's talk about his game versus Miami. He ended up starting out as safety, ended up actually playing some free safety reps as well. He got pancaked in the run. He let up a touchdown in zone coverage. He should have ran faster across the field. He did identify a release tight end late, but it also wasn't his responsibility, so I thought it was actually quite a nice job. I ended up saying, based on this tape, I don't really understand the hype at all. A tight end got separation with physicality. I like how he can play multiple positions, but he doesn't play either corner or safety necessarily well. He did a nice job on a specific double move. I didn't think he was a great athlete. He ended up missing his hands on press coverage, and then he did it again the next play. I said he's best in off coverage, and then he ended up being pulled. So Mansour is getting a lot of love, and I think he will end up being a top 100 pick. VT tends to breed those type of corners, and I'm a fan of the VT corners. I actually have Dorian Strong above Mansour Delan. I did at the start of the year as well. And this is one of those picks where one of the guys that I feel like I'm wrong about because everybody's saying that they love him, and I just can't. But, I mean, if this comes back to bite me in the ass, I always have this phrase, I'd rather be wrong about players I don't like because good football is better than being right. Like, I'd rather a team not spend a second-round pick on Mansour Delan and have him be an absolute bust. I'd rather him end up being, like, kick-ass and then me being like, okay, well, what did I do wrong? So, you guys know corner's, like, my favorite position to evaluate, so I was really hoping, because I've watched Mansour a ton of times as well. I was really hoping to be able to see something new this time, and unfortunately, I did not. And up next is Thaddeus Dixon. He had quite a few games this year that was actually really awesome in terms of interceptions as well as pass breakups. But unfortunately, I will just say the study wasn't as enjoyable as what I was really hoping for with him. You guys know I love Washington corners, and this was going to be exciting for me. But let's talk about his game versus Michigan. He ended up missing his punch off the bat. A punch is at the line of scrimmage when you try to press a guy. He ended up having a solid tackle, but he's a bit stiff when he ended up having to do a hard turn. Nice job in zone, feeling the play develop, not an overly explosive athlete. He did not identify a running back flat when he was in zone coverage. He was extremely stiff. His stiffness even showed up on the blitz. Ended up missing a quarterback that was pretty much wide open on a blitz. He has flashes of brilliance, but I don't know if that can overcome deficiencies in the NFL as a corner. He might end up having to be a defensive back rather than a corner, and he holds when he is beaten on certain routes. So, two notes there at the end. Defensive back pretty much means that this guy should be a safety. If you're not overly athletic and you're not smooth, you probably shouldn't play slot. So I do think this guy should probably end up playing a safety role that can be mitigated with that speed with his intelligence. When he holds on to certain players when they're beaten, there's two different ways that you can go about this. There's the schemed way to do it, which is called catch man, where you're pretty much in off coverage, and then the receiver comes into you and you pretty much catch their body and allow their momentum to carry you as you catch up with them. That's not what's happening here. Basically, he gets beaten because he does a poor job, or he's out of position, or else he's just not necessarily athletic enough to keep up, and he grabs to be able to make sure separation doesn't happen. Now, do I prefer that over a touchdown? Yes, especially in college where I don't believe there's spot fouls. But I do think that there are deficiencies to Thaddeus' game to where he will be making a return in my defensive back video. A lot of some of these players will be, but I do think that defensive back will be the far better route because there's some issues that I think needs to be accounted for. So continuing on, let's go to Miles Purchase here. Miles Purchase is Darian Porter's teammate that a lot of people ended up mentioning, and this dude's a fun player. He's a very, very fun player. Let's talk about him versus UCF. You guys will see if a player has played against Miami, UCF, most likely I'm going to watch them. So I like to keep things pretty apples to apples as well. Usually if a corner struggles versus a particular style of wide receiver, it's good to see how other corners that are like him can play. So regardless, let's get into this. He ended up starting off the game with some nice off-man coverage, especially versus a slant coverage. He has some good punches so far, so that's why his physicality grade's so high. He ended up letting a wide receiver get inside. He is explosive, not necessarily top speed. I call him a little jitterbug. He's willing to help support versus the run. He can struggle from accelerating backwards to forwards. Overall solid performance. I wish the rotation was not so heavy. And guess what? I'm going to give you a second game because that was too short. Versus Kansas. He had a garbage pass rush, late identification on a certain player in zone. He can get confused a bit confused and stuck trying to decide which guy to guard in zone coverage. So that's why the grade's an F. He pretty much is indecisive. His change of direction is kind of lacking at his height. He got beat on a double move. His top speed is limited. He might be a promising nickel. Awful job in zone on a double move. He bit and then did not help with recovering, leading to a big gain. Basically, he wasn't athletic enough to make up the separation. He's very lucky he did not end up letting another touchdown because of a huge drop when he was playing in zone. So, he's a physical guy. Probably going to be better as a nickel. Don't really trust him in zone when he has a large quantity of area to, pretty much play zone. I think mesh would mess up Miles Purchase a little bit, but, I see a lot of traits there that I like far more than the guys before. And so I actually think that he could be a late round steal for a team that deploys him properly. Now let's talk about Noel Williams. Noel's really fun. He's been going off this year in terms of interceptions and stuff. We might even be able to get him on the show. And this guy has the potential to be something awesome. Like right now, once you get past that 62 mark, I started feeling like all these players have a role for themselves in the NFL, which is awesome. It's good to know. So for Noel Williams, let's talk about his game versus, where's that? Miami. Well, surprise, surprise, right? So he has late identifications on the rundowns. So basically, he doesn't really understand that the run's going on. His feet are pretty damn heavy. Granted, he's actually fluid for a heavy feet guy. Not going to lie, I have yet to see a good rep in 20 plays. That ended up changing as the game goes on. It's because he started out in zone coverage. So far, he's covered no one well in zone. He's a solid athlete. When shaded inside on press man, he has a chance to truly shine. Oh my lord, the defensive coordinator actually started shading him inside on press man, and he has done so much better. Isn't it crazy that when a defensive coordinator plays his players to their strengths, they perform better? You'd think that teams would start picking up on that in college. Cough, cough, Ohio State. They have two players who suck in off-man coverage, and they put them in off-man all the time. But we'll get to that point when we get there. It is what it is. He has an issue in most coverages where he's not able to press at the line of scrimmage, especially after a wide receiver breaks inward. Zone coverage is simply not for him. He let a guy by in his blind spot and then let him deep. And then ended up being actually an overthrow by Cam Ward, but it would have been a touchdown. So, Noel Williams has a very, very limited impact early on in his career as a press man corner, but that is extremely valuable. You think about Jeff Hafley's system to where this guy could be a depth corner, and he can end up learning And he already has great ball skills. That's why he got that it factor, and he's a physical guy. Like, he actually could be an absolute stud if you give him that leash and that learning opportunity to continue to grow, develop, and go up the roster. So Noel Williams is someone who I am a fan of. I really do hope we can get him on the show. I'm not saying this just to like be nice to him. He probably doesn't even, he's not going to watch this. But regardless, I do think that Noel Williams does have the potential to be one of the steals of the draft. And even though he's number 35 on my corner list, it's because overall as a corner, which I will be doing a man versus zone corner video where we'll re-rank these corners and show you guys how they end up actually stacking up in heavier systems of man versus heavier systems of zone. So Dante Fagan's next, another guy who I've actually made contact with, and we might be able to get on the show. This guy ended up actually almost lurking Drew Alar in week number 2, so that's what caught my eye. He's a very, very, very solid corner there for West Virginia, coming from JUCO as well. So excited to give him some love. Versus Kansas State, which, by the way, Kansas State, their receivers destroy every corner I watch it versus them. Like, we might need to start digging into all the receivers there. Like, they have some good guys. So Fagan ended up doing really well versus University of Arizona. This was a worse game. So it was his first start as well. So I think that's also really crucial to note. He did a nice identification on a deep route developing in his zone coverage. He did a good tackle in open field. His top speed could be limited. A deep post got separation, and he did not end up regaining the ground he lost. He had a solid pass breakup attempt on a deep post that had separation, but his arms seemed kind of short. I do appreciate, though, his use of physicality. Short and sweet, Tez is still developing. He's actually pretty adequate in every single area of his game, which I think is going to be super crucial. And you could potentially use him at 5'10", 188 as one of those nickel guys when you look at someone who's physical, who's fluid, and someone who actually has a solid foundation of coverage. This dude could end up being a legitimate factor on your team because he actually is the developmental guy. I dropped him 2 points, though, because, well, he's 5'10", 188. So let's continue on. We got Woody Washington here. And Woody was a bit higher on my ranking. Of course, I've brought in a lot of corners. So that's probably the reason why. I'm trying to dodge the sun here. I don't know if you guys see that. The damn sun is like lasering my face right now. But Woody, let's talk about his game versus Tennessee. He ended up starting out with some good run defense, as he's had this whole damn time. He seems to let up a lot of room on particular slants, but he had specific zone duties, and the linebacker ended up failing. He could have assisted better on that slant coverage. He has this little oh fuck moment before he makes a move after a wide receiver cuts. And actually, I saw this with Gentry Williams too, which, by the way, I think he had a season-ending injury, which sucks because you guys know I really like Gentry Williams. He, to me, was like if you ended up wanting Kobe Bryant, but like a slightly cheaper version that you can get later on, it was kind of that. But both of these guys, like the Oklahoma corners, they end up having this like lag moment where the wide receiver cuts and then they go. And I'm like, what the fuck? So that's exactly what I mean. It's like literally said, oh fuck moment before making a move after a wide receiver cuts. They did have a heavy rotation, like literally every other drive they would put different guys in. His acceleration appears to be a bit off. He could not get to the wide receiver in time in off-man coverage. Good pass breakup after poor coverage on a skinny post. It was thrown with poor timing. His top speed is okay, nothing insane, but it can make up some ground for his issues with acceleration. And then he ended up getting torched by a double move and ended up getting yanked. So Tennessee is a great team with a lot of great athletes. Like, keep that in mind as well. It was a bad matchup for Woody, but also another player that might have to end up being a solid nickel because he is physical, he is fluid, and solid foundation overall. So looking forward to seeing Woody Washington continue his career in the NFL. But again, there's not going to be 41 players starting on new teams. So got to be a little bit more of a stickler. Robert Longerbeam is next. This is I love Rutgers players. You guys know I loved Max Melton last year. So let's talk about his game versus USC. You guys will see some trends here. Also, you will also see where my all-22 sources focus on producing content. But he ended up having a really slow identification on run coverage, or on a running down. Seems like his instincts are low. There's a reason. That's why I like to be able to read this to you guys. It gives justification for why I end up talking about things. He ended up allowing a touchdown on a drag route that he let up early separation on. It was on the goal line. Great change of direction on a particular comeback route. His top speed seems a bit limited due to another drag that gave up separation. Solid use of his physicality for his side. He is a developmental guy with some man coverage abilities. Simple, short, sweet. Just a player that like you will be wanting to, take some time to develop him. He is small though, 5'11", 180. Like it is not going to be someone that you're going to be overly excited to develop, but he's had some really solid games. He's also had some games where he lets up 100 yards, so he's going to be a little bit more of a project guy, but I really do love Rutgers players. They do have a really nice foundation coming into the NFL. BJ Adams is next. UCF has some good corners, man, and BJ Adams is a weird corner. Like, you look at him, this dude looks like he's 6'6". Like, he towers over people. It's insane. So I said he wears number 0. That's a badass way to start. He's twitchy, but he looks extremely clumsy. The dude straight up looks so. I don't know if you guys have seen the meme, but it's from Monsters Inc. And it's a guy going like, woo! Like that's kind of how BJ Adams runs. And I'm forgetting what other player ended up doing that as well. I think it was last year. I ended up saying you could always find this player because he runs like that. I'll have to look that up, but. Like BJ Adams at his size, it's very funny because he is very lanky, very good arm length and all that stuff. He literally moves like, and it's just crazy. But his top speed is questionable at the moment. He ended up taunting a wide receiver after they dropped a ball, which I'm not a huge fan of because that could, like, he stared down the wide receiver when he did jack shit. For me, first off, you didn't do anything to earn that. Second off, not really a huge fan on a third down, by the way. This is versus Colorado. Forgot to mention that. I know that there's a lot of shit talk from Colorado, but just like, don't do that. Don't do that. But he ends up playing very nervous. You can sense the anxiety that a player plays with when, like, certain players, you'll see how smooth they are and just like how they aren't necessarily like itching to go. And, you can talk about it in certain ways. Like after watching corners for 4.5 years, I feel like I can understand when they're excited versus when they're pretty much anxious. And it felt very anxious for BJ Adams, and it ended up being empirical through the coverage. He ended up firing his hand out and was out of range, which is wild with how lanky he is. So imagine like a particular fighter with good punching range, with like good arm length, and then just absolutely whiffing on a punch. When he, like, it was insane. He actually had like 6 inches of range that he put out his hand when there was still 6 inches of separation past his length. Like, this dude will probably have 35-inch arms, 34. That's my guess. Like, this dude has insane arm length. Like, look, he looks like damn Kevin Durant on there. But, yeah, no, when you just absolutely miss a punch, not whiff one, because there's certain wide receivers that, like they'll, like, dodge your punch. How do you miss your punch when you literally can outlength the dude by, like, 10-1, right? Like, it's insane. Regardless. So he ends up having some really good zone instincts. I said the zone instincts are popping up. 45-degree cuts, so slants, skinny posts, etc. Get easy separation. He ended up allowing a touchdown to Travis Hunter on a bended in route. He has awful tackling because he's skinny and he has some lanky ass arms. And then I said, kind of want this dude to be a big ass lanky safety with zone coverage ability and just like being able to have that range. I thoroughly believe this dude should be a safety convert, and I think he could be a really awesome one at that. The problem is you're going to be looking at him primarily as a deep safety because he's not really supportive in the run. But I mean, it's certainly intriguing. Like, this is such a big project player that I'd either want him buried on a depth chart that would still use him, or be on a team like the Ravens or the Seahawks that would genuinely be able to develop him and have a track record of doing so. Now let's talk about Will Lee. Very similar. Both these guys I think were 6'3", 190. But let's talk about Will Lee's game versus LSU. He actually did improve compared to where he was last year. I think he has the same grade, but I had a little bit more of a stickler grade on him before, and I'm a little bit more tough on athleticism overall. So he ended up having a great first rep because he had good patience. Using a lot of physicality, but he does yank a bit too much while going downfield. Ended up actually allowing a PI because of that. He can end up building up speed, but he does have a slight lag. So I'll say that. He ended up having huge slant separation. Very inconsistent in man because he's absolutely locked down on reps on routes that are 5 yards and beyond, but he cannot handle a slant route. He could not change direction on a comeback route in time, leading to a catch. He looks a bit uncomfortable in zone. Kyron Lacy's been lighting it up, by the way. So I do also put those notes in for myself to be able to reference them for later. He has a big issue with routes with more than one primary directional change as well. So Will Lee is very Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, if you guys know the story. Like, he'll either be ridiculously locked down or just let up a big play. I hope that changes, but that could be his kryptonite, but it's definitely worth taking a swing at. Deon Jackson, someone who I was saying could have been a first-round pick this year if he ended up developing properly. Bottom line, he didn't. I still have a lot of faith in the guy, but I do think he should return, hence why I have that recycle logo for him. Like, he's a true junior. He has an extra year. Go back, use it, and be a top corner in next year's class. So I ended up watching him versus Tennessee, another team that I really like to study players against. It was his worst game overall. So it starts out with him having a nice cut and off man versus a post. Great coverage on a deep hitch. He's very fluid overall. He did get blown by, but had solid recovery speed and should have throttled up a little bit earlier. He had great timing on a pass breakup. Would have liked slightly quicker reaction timing, but he has solid athleticism to make up for it. He had a weird rep where he properly covers an in-breaking route, and he then stopped as it redirected sideways and ended up being caught. So he ended up covering the first route and then didn't cover the play extension, if that's like the easiest way to describe that. Change of direction can definitely improve overall. Not going to lie, his coverage quality and man has dropped off since his first reps, and then Chris Brazzell has kept flying by him overall. So Deon Jackson's still somebody. He was a very developmental player before. I just had a lot more confidence in him than I do right now. He added 7 pounds, so I'm sure that's why it's not necessarily super comfortable. But I honestly thought 6'1", 190 was perfectly fine. So maybe he can end up losing a little bit of the weight and get back to the quality player that he is supposed to be. Max Harrison's next. This is another hot one. A lot of people have Max Harrison even in the first round. So versus Georgia, you guys see, I actually think that very highly of him in man coverage. Like, I'll say that right now. I think he's a very good man corner. He's a good athlete. For man corners, he's going to be far higher grade. So he'll be definitely worth far higher than the 28th best corner. But again, this is a holistic approach where you look at physicality, run support, etc. Continuing on though. So for versus Georgia, he's willing to help versus the run. He has good patience and off-man coverage. He gets shoved off pretty easily. A ton of off coverage, which he's kind of known for as well, which is good. He did a great job handling a double move. He got stuck between a rock and a hard place with his deep zone coverage. He did end up being somewhat able to keep up with a deep post, but he did not regain the lost ground. He did a poor job staying in position and looking back for the ball on a particular rep. He's doing an excellent job in off-man, to be honest. Not enforceable at all, though. The physicality is not his strong suit. So I do like there's definitely a system where I think Max Harrison could even be a corner 2 in the NFL. It's just you need to be very, very, very specific about the role that he plays, and it's primarily off-man coverage that he's going to be proficient at. It's not necessarily going to be many other specific packages or coverages. Like off-man coverage, this guy's going to kick some ass. But it is going to be a little bit of a longer learning or a steeper learning curve for the rest of his coverage ability than I think what people like to give credit for. Dorian Strong's next. I really like Dorian Strong. He's somebody that, again, we already talked about Mansour Delan, but Dorian Strong is very, very, very underrated. People don't talk about him remotely in the same light as some of these other corners, and I'm here to give him some love. So let's talk about his game versus Miami as well, because I like to be able to watch, especially the same corners versus the same receivers, and Dorian also ended up playing the same game as Mansour, so I think it's worth it. He is a limited athlete off the bat. He got put in the spin cycle. He said, far from bad, he's just so limited, I don't know if he can translate to the NFL as an athlete. Some nice zone coverage with IQ as well as a pass breakup in it. He said, I said, good catch, man rep. So, okay, there we go. I was like, what the hell am I writing here? So he ended up talking about catch man, where I mentioned it earlier. I think it was, what was it, with Aiden White? Ended up saying that he just ended up catching dudes when he ended up getting beat. But regardless, back to Dorian. Catch man, basically you're in off coverage, you wait for him, and then you can actually like slightly tug at their waist and then use that momentum to get you going. So, yeah, he ended up having a good catch man rep, which is not common. A lot of these players suck at catch man. He has honestly been solid outside of his athleticism. He's not Aiden White level athlete bad though. I don't get it confused. It just is what it is at this point. I don't know if it will be an issue translating. He's improved big time since last year, in my opinion. He uses physicality well for being over the top. He did get a PI on this specific play that I was mentioning, though. Good pass breakup for a tipped interception. He left his guy in deep zone coverage, so this is the play Mansour got a pick in this game. He was actually covering a deep route and then ended up seeing Cam Ward throwing the ball and instantly broke off his man and then ended up having a great pass breakup that ended up leading to that interception. I have yet to see him honestly flat-footed, and that is awesome. He ended up missing a punch leading to a slant being caught, but I mean, overall, Dorian Strong has an actual future in the NFL. I'm excited to see where he goes, but we'll see. We'll see. Like, I hope the athleticism doesn't, like, that's why it's a D. It's subpar, right? I'm really hoping it doesn't get in his way. Then let's talk about Denzel Burke. God, this is a kick in my nuts. I mean, I love Denzel Burke. You guys know this. We'll talk about the game versus Oregon. Like, I think that's the game we need to hear about because that's the game where he got fucking toasted for 170 plus. And so let's see why. Pretty much bench pressed by Tez Johnson off the bat, which is nuts. Tez Johnson's really strong though. I mean, he's a good player. He got out physicaled again at the line. How are these stick bugs benching him? I did call Tez Johnson a stick bug before, so it's a reference to that. He ended up whiffing on a punch at the line of scrimmage. I said just loved a rep, then realized it was Iggy. So I ended up actually liking a particular rep that he did, and then I realized it was not him. So I try to give guys credit, and I'm like, well, shit, that wasn't you. He lacks recovery acceleration on double moves. He turned his head around too late, which ended up leading to a touchdown. It is the acceleration that needs serious work. He got stuck on his heels, flat-footed, once again and did not have recovery acceleration to be in position to stop a touchdown. My guy is shivering his timbers. I shit you not. I'm like reading it directly from this. I should make it sound more cool, but you know, it is what it is. He does a nice job when he lands his hands. Man, he just has no acceleration, clean separations allowed. It's clown-looking rep versus Ferguson. Awful whiff on press leading to a wide-open slant. Luckily, it was tipped, but should have been another touchdown. Awful pursuit on a deep hitch. His shoulders were way too far ahead, and then he flew by, leading to another catch. His best reps are the ones where he locks up the wide receiver for making fake moves on rundowns. I didn't know that was the line. I'm like, woof. I'm like, oh, nice. I mean, I feel like, you know, being able to lock down a receiver for making route fakes is good. And then I realized it was on rundowns. And I said, oh, Lord, this was actually an awful performance. Like certain players, so we'll talk about Iggy later. David Igbenogson, I ended up studying like his games where he actually did have really poor grades. And then you understand why. For Denzel Burke, like, I still think he goes top 100 based on his overall production throughout his whole entire career. But this game absolutely exposed where he actually struggles. And it bothers me. It does bother me. I'm excited to see him bounce back, though. I really hope he does. Then let's go to Odin El Fortune. This guy's a beast. I do really like him. But let's talk about his game versus Ole Miss. He's possibly top speed limited, which isn't that bad. I mean, it's talking about like very limited, like very slightly limited. He ended up whiffing on a press on Trey Harris. He flashes some good zone IQ. Poor angle when he was cutting on a hitch route. Exposed on a double move. Heavier feet, good break on a ball, and as well as a tackle. His angles overall are iffy. He let up another double move, and he ended up being taken out for the rest of the game. But I'm going to add LSU on here because it's a short one too. He ended up starting out with a nice pass breakup. By the way, I was studying this live on a stream, so you know you guys can end up actually watching that back as well as the 4-hour stream where I was doing a watch along. But this LSU game was recommended as well. He had a nice pass breakup off the bat. He's doing well in zone. His change of direction is better than I gave him credit for originally. CJ Daniels just cut directly under. He fails when he's shaded inside. He ended up letting up a touchdown to a tight end as well. So, I mean, bottom line, you look, there's nothing that's actually bad about Odin El Fortune, and he actually has some good relative strengths. It's weird to see a player who's not necessarily good in man, who is relatively physical, who has high-end zone IQ, as well as really solid athleticism overall. I'm excited to see where he ends up, but I mean, he definitely has some traits that are translatable to the NFL, and based on how he performed versus LSU, which is a really good team, it's good to see that he still is able to produce versus top-end talent. 24, we got Ricardo Hallman. I was about to say Rico Hallman, but it's not Rico. I think some people call him Rico Hallman, but Ricardo Hallman, he was somebody who I ended up not liking in the preseason just because I thought he actually didn't have a very high motor, and that's completely washed away this year. I think he's done a phenomenal job, so I'm going to give him credit for that. But let's talk about his game versus Alabama, because he got absolutely cooked. So let's see why. He feels fluid in space. He did miss an open field tackle. He ended up having a great tackle on Milroe right after that. He feels very Sebastian Castro-esque in terms of quick, short-range acceleration, but garbage in middle to high-range acceleration, not excel. Doing a good job at sealing the edge versus the run. Good play designed by Alabama. Ended up drifting in to help cover a skinny post and left the zone open for a delayed go route. I actually ended up seeing this. It was not even his fault, Ricardo Hallman. It was Ryan Williams with his brilliant playmaking ability, and Jalen Milroe did a good job at pretty much understanding exactly what was happening there. Like, it was designed to where I think it was just supposed to be a hitch by Ryan Williams, and then there was a skinny post with a slot receiver, and so Hallman, ending up realizing that's what it was, ended up drifting in. The flat defender didn't end up carrying Ryan Williams at all, and then that ended up being the big play. So I'm not going to blame Ricardo Hallman for that at all. It's just, it's what it is. So his top speed let Jeremy Bernard end up getting separation and ended up keeping it. Starting to feel like this guy is primarily a slot/defensive back. He feels like a lower end Mike Sainer still. The way he plays, or actually I said the way he plays deep zone so well makes me really love the idea of a safety transfer. The bottom line is Ricardo Hallman, he just doesn't have, we're talking about Sebastian Castro level acceleration, but he also doesn't really have the speed to make up the ground. So it is potentially concerning, but because he has that small short range acceleration and he does have fluidity, I think he can really make it work. And I do think he will end up having the good ball skills as well. He can end up being a box guy as well. There's a lot of flexibility to where it's one of the few times where athleticism is below a C, and I still have confidence in the player. Then we go to Zaire Alexander next. By the way, I have him higher as a safety than this. Just going to call that out right now. I think this dude's an absolute baller. So don't take him at 23 as a negative. He's a good player. Let's talk about his game versus Ole Miss, though. Gorgeous pass breakup at the beginning. Ended up dropping deep to help in deep half coverage. Staying square, another nice pass breakup. One issue is change of direction from the reverse to forward. Nice open field tackles. I wish he closed faster. He's not built for off man. He's too slow out of his break. He ended up missing his hands on a punch, interception on an underthrown ball. There's guys getting steps on him every rep, though. So a way that I study players, and this is why I didn't love TJ Tampa last year, is I look at if the quarterback threw the ball every time. Let's just say pure arm arrogance. The quarterback threw the ball every time. Will it be complete, or is it is a good game necessarily because the player locks him down, or because the quarterback doesn't throw the ball either way, right? There's definitely a difference there. And for Zai, I think that in man coverage, because he's not necessarily the most explosive, it does get to him, and it does end up leading to where it's it could have been completed, right? But I think there's a lot of really positive traits to his game because you look at all of what he does well. And I think that, when you have good instincts, zone coverage, frame, physicality, and run support, you're going to be an absolute stud as a safety. So that's why I'm going to have him higher as a safety. He's not necessarily a starting grade safety just yet, but I do think he's very close to it. And just keep that in mind. This is a fringe rotational corner. If he has to go into a corner system, I'm not going to disagree. It's just, I want to put that out there. Chandler Rivers is next. I really like Chandler Rivers. I mean, he's a 3- because he's 5'10 and he's 180, but this dude's a stud. So I ended up looking at his game versus Miami. Granted, it was one of his best games, but when you look at it, again, the litmus test, looking at all these players, it was also the only game I had in all 22, but it was a great game to look at because there's really good receivers. So he flashes zone instincts off the bat. He can get out physicaled with length, as you expect. When you're 5'10, you probably don't have the same arm length as those receivers that are bigger than you. He's a good tackler overall. His top speed appears to be fine. His acceleration as well is relatively solid. He does a good job when he has the hand on the wide receiver. His mid-excel can be a liability. So remember when I was talking about that Sebastian Castro thing? That's the same thing. The 10 to 30 out of a 0 to 60, I say. He almost got toasted deep. Nice pass breakup on a seam. Pass interference on the next target. Poor angle on a particular slant RPO. Not good in catch man due to arm length, which does make sense. I don't know why these college corners have such a hard time reacting to slants. Something that does bother me. I mean, like all these college corners do not understand how to react to a slant. It beats me. He needs to keep his leverage on his toes. He got caught flat-footed again on a slant route. I don't know why he isn't being shaded inside. Woof. A slant fake fade. So a sluggo essentially got him extremely badly. Excellent in zone coverage with some crucially horrible reps in man with routes that are consistently thrown in the NFL. So that's why you got to be careful with this guy. But, he is really, really fun to watch overall. It's just very similar to Malachi Moore. Very good overall. The bad reps are just pretty damn bad. Now let's talk about Jason Marshall. Again, if you guys didn't hear earlier, this plus logo is someone who, they're out for the year with injury. And their grade is not affected by that. I want to just be completely transparent. But that's also why I want you guys to understand that, hey, this grade is contingent on them being hurt. If they get back to where they were, this is what they should be. So Jason Marshall, let's talk about his game versus, say it with me, Miami. I said it could look at Texas A&M, but this is the worst game, and it's versus better weapons. So he's anticipating routes in zone. He ended up rolling to the same side as a boot, which is really good. He has good instincts in zone. He identified a deep developing route and covered it as well. He looks fast overall, which is true. I mean, he covered freaking Brian Thomas on a streak. He got toasted by Brian Thomas and ended up tackling him too. So, I mean, he does have that top speed. It's shown. So hopefully that shoulder injury somehow doesn't slow him down, but I guess it could, if you don't work on your athleticism much. But let's get back to it, right? He stayed put too long and got stiff, allowing a player to fly by. Luckily, it ended up not being a touchdown. Excellent job in press on a drag route. He just kept putting his hands on the player. He plays with a little bit more anxiety than I would like, but he's doing a great job overall, especially with press coverage. This ended up dropping as the game went on. He has played some slot reps as well. His best traits are zone and press man. Off man has been by far his worst. He ended up missing a punch in press. By the way, I ended up taking back the press man solely because he ends up missing his punches way too much. You'll hear about that in a second. Again, these notes are designed to be a play-by-play. Instant reaction. You're watching the game with me. He ended up missing a punch and press. He's doing an unbelievable job analyzing developing routes in zone. I don't know if I even want him in man very much at all, regardless of the physicality. He has been a non-factor versus the run. I saw a deep route developing again. Both of the last times, deep middle failed their job and allowed a catch. He ended up missing his punch again. He misidentified a swing route. I would not say he's a super smooth mover, but he's not stiff. He's just a bit choppy. He's not running with the whole play. Excited to see how he develops this year. And then he ended up ending off with missing another punch. So I think that's pretty self-explanatory. His man coverage is good when his press works. But outside of that, I do have my concerns with him. Jason Marshall, though, is a fantastic player. He's someone who you guys have known I've been a big fan of for a while. But watching him flourish in zone after he was primarily a press man corner, it makes me smile. I have a lot of faith in this guy. It's just I'm really hoping that shoulder injury, he just ended up taking the year off just because he wants to get healthy, and maybe he can go to a bowl game. So I'm excited to see if he goes to one of the postseason bowls, like the Senior Bowl. Then we got Kobe Bryant at 20. He ended up slipping a little bit, but that's okay. I mean, I think since he got up to 175, I'm a little bit less worried than the 170 number, which we already know we're about to get humbled when we go to the combine. He's going to be 160, but let's get back to it. Let's look at his game versus UNLV. It was his worst game so far when I ended up watching it. He ends up grabbing a bit early. He got blown by on a nasty fake post that ended up being an out route, leading to a huge gain. He did recover and ended up making the tackle. He likes to hold around the wide receiver's waist mid-rep. He ended up falling down mid-rep, but he did not do a good job covering a streak on a contested catch situation. The ref decked him mid-rep. So usually you see the ref get absolutely annihilated. It ended up being Kobe Bryant. He does a better job when getting his hands on at the start of every rep. Every time he is outside shade, he gets beat, especially when the route stems outside. and he grabs to try to regain control, leading to flags. Not a good move. He put him in this, or I said, put him in the slot. Then this motherfucker allows a wheel route touchdown. I said, in all caps, I said this. Stop running into and grabbing the motherfucking receiver, bro. God dang. And that is so true. I got frustrated watching Kobe Bryant. Great wrap up in space. His best coverage so far has been versus tight ends, which is insane for his size. Beat by a double move, but he did have the speed to catch up. Shade this MF inside or have him very far outside where he cannot get toasted outside. So he is very susceptible to the blind spot. The blind spot is something I've been learning from, actually, I think it's called First Down Football or First Down Academy. It's a wide receiver group on Instagram, but they end up posting stories actually that you pretty much, they quiz you, and it's actually really, really, like that's how I learned about catch man and stuff as well. So I think it would be really good for you guys to study that as well. But regardless of that, like it was just so good to see, like they describe, hey, how do you run this route versus coverage? And it's like running into the blind spot. And you start realizing that certain corners with really good instincts can feel their blind spot and feel it well. And Kobe can't, because when players go into his blind spot, they fly by him and he doesn't know. Let's get back to it though. Reaction timing on slants is a bit slow, but the acceleration is awesome. I still have faith. He just gets into a mental spiral and overcompensates with grabbing poorly and rather than correcting his form and technique. So I'm really hoping Kobe bounces back. I mean, he does have all what you're looking for in terms of the athleticism, even the physicality for his size, and he does have some production there as well. Like, you just add a little bit extra weight, I'd be happy with a B+ athleticism at 180 pounds. Like, that's me. But I don't think that his size, based on his overall athleticism, like last year, he was known because he ended up destroying a dude on a bubble screen. Like, the physicality doesn't suffer at his weight. So it could end up being a Nate Wiggins-esque type of guy. But I think Nate Wiggins was far better as a corner. But Kobe Bryant still is pretty much like a cheap version of Nate Wiggins. Maybe that could have been my comp for him. And continuing on at number 19, we have Melo Dodson. And he's a fun player, man. I mean, obviously teammates there with Kobe Bryant. But, I mean, I wanted to be able to check this guy out. He's top 100 on some boards. So I wanted to make sure that we got him in on this. So very excited to watch him. And let's talk about his game versus Kansas State. He has this particular ominous lurk. It's very funny. It's just a very like Batman-y presence when he's just like slowly stepping behind. His feet feel very heavy. He has a nice transition from back to front. His catch man as well seems solid. He drifted inside and played an inside route when the safety told him to stay outside. So I saw this particular rep. He was here, safety was here. There was two wide receivers. There was one that ended up going out and one that ended up bowing in. He ended up sticking to the inside when the safety ended up saying, hey, go outside. And so the safety had to cover up for that mistake. Now, do I understand if that was the particular, like, if Melo was wrong or the safety? I don't know. But definitely still worth mentioning there. So he ended up then failing catch man after that, leading to separation that could have been a touchdown. His change of direction can definitely improve as seen on a particular out route. He does get to top speed relatively quickly. He did get a pass breakup as well. He absolutely shanked Catchman again, leading to another wide open touchdown possible play. He ended up, of course, not allowing the touchdown because it wasn't thrown, which is why when you watch corners, always end up looking at the play as if the quarterback targeted the receiver. Don't like solely look at the stats. That's why you can't stat watch, because Melo should have allowed a touchdown on that. But regardless, getting back to it, he does a nice job versus the run. He allows guys to get behind him in his blind spot and zone and can over pursue. So he ends up over dropping. He is very smart and has primarily only issues in catch man. Off zone, he's done well. He needs to time his feet better because he's been caught flat-footed twice on slants, but he does react well. Next play and off coverage looked a bit lighter on his feet. Overall, I do understand why people have him top 100. So Melo Dodson certainly could end up being a really real quality player, but he obviously has some issues to work on. Next, we got Ephesians Prysock, who I had originally much higher than this, which it is what it is. I knew that it was somebody that I didn't fully believe would end up being at this level, but let's get into this. Let's talk about his game versus Michigan. Not a ton of reps here, but Regardless, it wasn't an elite test, but it's still good to see him versus some higher end talent. He does a very good job in off zone coverage. He had a nice pass breakup. He missed tackle in open space, and he gave up a lot of space in standard man coverage. I said he's far more effective in press man and zone than he is in pretty much any other support. So it was short and sweet, but I think it represents the majority of what's going on as well. I thought his athleticism looked a lot better this year than it did last at Arizona, but at 6'4", 193, it's hard to complain about. He's certainly a good project, and then you could even potentially use him at safety if you do deem him not built to be a corner. Let's talk about the next player, another one that you guys shouted out, Odin El Fortune. He's probably going to be a nickelback, so just keep that in mind, but I do still grade players if they've taken reps at boundary corner at both. So Jordan will be making a return, so I'm excited for that. But let's look at his game versus Penn State. I think it's fair. There's not many Bowling Green games that would be remotely close to that. So he's a little bit late on a lot of run identifications. There you go. There's that instinct grade of a C. Solid off man, a little bit slow changing north-south, but not bad. Smooth east-west change of direction, so lateral versus vertical. Great in off man so far. High-end nickel potential if he cannot stay on the boundary. So I really love that about him. He does have that potential to be really good if he can't work on the boundary. I can tell why they leave him in off coverage. His top speed is definitely not top tier. He's willing to hit even tight ends with full force. Yeah, he is a battering ram. I really like that about him. He's been an asset in the run defense as well as run after the catch defense. Unreal tackling could easily end up being a high-end nickel. Excellent pass breakup showing the lack of top speed but determination. I have that on my X page as well. Feel free to use that link tree. But then, overall, I mean, it was a very big surprise. I really do think this guy could be up there as an elite nickel range. So talk about really fucking good value. Odin El Fortune, gonna be that dude. Then we got Tacario Davis. This one I really don't have very many notes for. I talked about him 3 times on the series now, so not really gonna be somebody who I'm gonna talk about too much in depth, but he's been super up and down this year. But regardless, versus Kansas State, he had a poor change of direction leading to a hitch completion. He got beat inside with a post that ended up being dropped, and then he ended up being most likely injured on that play, but that was like the best game, in my opinion, based on the quantity of games that they played that I really thought that, was translatable compared to the other players. But Tacario, just bottom line with him, he's always kind of lacked that top end speed, has always had solid acceleration. Quarterbacks threw his way because it looked like when he was changing direction, it looked like the guy was open, but his timing was pretty damn awesome. He's just somebody who's a good corner that just lacks a little bit of that fluidity that could end up forcing him to be a defensive back, but we'll see when all is said and done. But I've already talked about him so many times that it's not really news to what I'm actually going to say versus someone like Jacob Parrish that came out of nowhere that I do want to talk about. This guy's an absolute savage. This is versus Arizona, funnily enough. Solid acceleration, but tough time transitioning to the forward leading to a catch. So north-south vertical transition. So far he's a solid athlete. I said his change of direction is rough north-south. So that's why the subpar on the change of direction. He's very willing to be physical. I do like him. Nice job cutting off a running back. That was pretty much sealing the edge. Caught flat-footed, could have been a touchdown. Oh my lord, an in-route ended up destroying him with change of direction. This is literally so weird how great he is most plays, then effing ass on others. Really nice open field tackle on a running back. I've not seen so much in terms of zone instincts. Continuously beat on drag routes because he takes an off-man approach and then ends up getting stuck in the middle of the mesh. He has not learned from his mistake yet. Good patience on guarding a second move on a play extension. Definitely see the slot possibility. Fearlessly goes versus Tetro McMillan in his lockdown versus the run. So, he's just somebody that, again, we talk about Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. The quantity of poor plays is much lower. And it's certainly interesting to see where Jacob Parrish will end up because he's physical, he's fearless, and he's someone, I ended up posting this on X as well, and I know people are going to complain about the amount of times I'm shouting it out. I'm not doing it to get followers. I could give a rat's ass. I'm just telling you guys, I'm literally mentioning the play, and I'm just telling you, go watch the damn play. So feel free to get mad with the mentions all you want, but I am trying to show you guys and give you guys evidence for what I'm trying to talk about. I ended up saying he identifies himself as Velcro on some plays because he literally sticks to the receiver. And, that is something that is worth trying to feel out. But the physicality, he easily could end up working in the nickel if you need him to, but he might end up having to stay in the boundary. I don't know. It's going to be a weird project because 5'10", 200 is a unique frame. Like, not many guys consistently can work at 5'10", but, he seems to do a really good job, even versus guys who are legitimately 7 inches taller than him. Let's talk about Quincy Riley next. Quincy Riley's a fun one. And if you guys can tell, I do have, spoiler alert, all these guys are tied. But Quincy Riley, let's talk about his game versus Miami. He's had a rough year this year. So he easily could be in the offseason when we get more and more tape. He could end up dropping a little bit. But still, the high-end plays are there. So versus Miami, late reaction to a post route. He does have explosiveness, but the reaction time is just off. Grabbing mid-rep, just do your job right and lock his ass up. So I do get a little bit pissed off when corners end up covering up for their issues with grabbing players rather than actually adjusting how they play. But again, I do love how low his stance is definitely showing his track athleticism more this year than last. He had a good pass breakup in the slot, nice break on a flat route. Overall, very up and down, but he has real quality flashes. And we've seen it last year as well. Quincy Riley does have that potential. He's a former track guy. Short and sweet. He's somebody that you're going to need to roll the dice on, but I think that it's worth it. Let's talk about Daylen Everette next. This is someone who a lot of people don't like, but the reason he got -2 is because he can't get his head around in coverage. Let's talk about his game versus Texas. Too far off and off coverage. Nice close on a flat route. Doing a good job of staying in position when he's in press coverage. Good overall play, even doing a good job at closing some range when he needs to. He's flagged on a streak play because he did not get his head around in time. Crushed Quinn Ewers on a blitz. And I said he has the it factor, which I ended up lowering it just because I didn't put a +1 because I do think that I could have done a -3 +1. Who gives a shit? He's not afraid of contact at all. Great job reading the eyes of a quarterback for interception and zone coverage. This was a particular bench concept where he read that Quinn was going to throw the out route rather than the streak in his zone, and he ended up lurking it for the interception. He ended up being burnt by a double move. He needs to have a higher top speed to gain some ground, but he can accelerate pretty damn well to cover a little bit of short ground to get to his top speed. So I said, wow, he did an excellent job covering Gunnar Helm. Can tell the top speed is not at the bond level when he gets separation over time and not off the bat. He's doing very well so far in off coverage since the first rep. Touchdown on a good design. Did not have the top speed to beat Bond to the pylon. Love how physical he is off the bat without being overwhelming. He can get in his own head at times and guess a double move when it is not. So basically he tries to overthink the play rather than just be slightly proactive. His eyes are on the quarterback in the zone. Great tackling this game. He just got juked by Gunnar Helm, though. Great patience and off man. He ended up biting on a fake inside jab. So a lot to really like about Daylen Everette. Gets a ton of shit for no reason. It's just because he doesn't make a ton of plays on the ball. So I think that he's going to be far better than what people give him credit for. Jahdae Barron's next. Really good player. Speaking of the same game, let's talk about him versus Georgia. He was graded as a defensive back coming into the year, ended up transitioning to boundary corner. Some people still think he'll have to end up going to the inside because of his arm length. But he ended up having 2 interceptions, but he ended up going versus the best wide receivers that Texas probably went against. He took a relatively poor correctional angle on Dylan Bell on a specific route. Both interceptions are not necessarily impressive at all. One of them was like a tip, I think, and then I'm trying to remember the other one, but I can't at the moment. Nice pass breakup with late break on the ball. Another interception that wide receiver ran into him and did not go for the ball. His acceleration is not unbelievable. I see wide receivers that are blowing past him and gaining ground. Not going to lie, I'm kind of underwhelmed, but he is smooth and at least has some really good zone IQ. Like, to me, I think Jahdae is going to be a stud if you use him properly, which is allow him to be in space, allow him to, cover a significant portion of ground, because I do think that the fluidity allows him to cover multiple areas without having to use athleticism to cover up for his mistakes. And, that is extremely coveted in the NFL. I think he's going to be a stud. He's done a great job this year. He's gotten better every single game, and I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being a really, really good player in the NFL. Darian Porter's next. So off the bat, I see 6'4", 200. I'm like, all right, this guy's going to be a little bit of a little stick that's a little lanky. And no, that's not the case because he has really quick feet. So I said off the bat, yes, quick feet. And I say he's a lanky MF, so he is still lanky, but he has quick feet. In off coverage, he needs to either be more enforceful or open up quicker. I love the quick feet, fluid hips, looked for the ball, but he did not catch it. He has a high top speed. He was thrown off because he had his shoulders pointed too far north. Double move got him, but he should fix that with proper shoulder placement. Short and quick and sweet. UCF's a great team with great receivers. Oh no, there's my one mistake of the video. I do have athleticism. That's a B+, and I did not end up changing it to green. Whoop-de fucking do, man. It is what it is. But Darian Porter's a great player. I mean, the fact that he's had like 4 starts at the time that I was doing this, ridiculous. Like how much he's progressed this early on is fantastic. Obviously, he has a lot of special team coverage as well. So I'm very excited to see where he could end up if he gets more and more development. But I can see a team like the Vikings with Brian Flores loving that physicality and using that frame and having something awesome there. DJ McKinney is next. I mean, off the bat, I'm like, this dude has the potential to be better than Travis Hunter. That was my initial gut reaction. I'm like, holy shit, this guy's a way better athlete. But Travis Hunter did end up getting the edge. But that is what it is. Starting out, let's talk about Kansas State. It was a bad game for DJ McKinney. I started out by saying, God damn, this guy's explosive. He's playing catch man well so far. Great block evasion. I ended up posting that on X. He's willing to lay the wood. Could improve his tackling technique, though. One just ended up catching him flat-footed on a slant. Could have been a touchdown easily. I said almost a good pass breakup. Does sometimes misread the play and think a run is a pass play. So he basically just sticks with the wide receiver. Holy fuck, this guy's a freak athlete. In standard man, he can get flat-footed at the line of scrimmage, awaiting the release or break, leading to quick separation. So rather than getting his hands on somebody, like when he's pretty much, let's just say you're there, I'm here, and I'm not getting my hands on you, he can end up being like on his heels. And then when you cut, he has to shift his weight and go forward rather than being, ready in position and then being able to break. So I think he gets a little flat-footed in standard man coverage, but I do think that's something overall he's done a good job at not doing. But regardless, of course, athleticism can make up for it, but that's twice now that slants have gotten separation. You could shade him inside or just have him get hands-on, and I feel like that separation will disappear. His zone feels more like show than tell. This is something that a lot of these corners have, including Miles Purchase. So sorry for the quick little shade that I just threw his way, but like a lot of guys they'll sit and they'll look sexy in zone. They'll like shift around and stuff, but you can realize they're not really guarding somebody. They're just like moving around in the area they're supposed to. It's very nuanced, the difference between actually covering your zone and actually just being in your zone. And I think DJ McKinney is still learning to cover in his zone, but at least he looks sexy while being in his zone. I digress though. I don't know who Kansas State has, but these MF wide receivers are good. He has an issue with getting flat-footed. We'll need to work on this at the next level. Top speed's a bit lower than I originally said, but we're talking about an 8 range, not a 9 range. Unreal potential, but lots to improve. Easily would recommend him returning, but I will include him nonetheless. I should have put the damn recycle emoji. Who gives a crap? But DJ McKinney's an absolute freak show. I mean, that's the bottom line. This dude's a freak show. I think that he's going to get drafted much higher than what people know of him, because he's going to test through the roof, and then they're going to start watching tape, and they're going to be like, this guy could be a first-round pick. He should be a first-round pick. He's a top 32 player on my board. Jermari Harris is next. Jermari Harris is a baller. I mean, I ended up really liking his game, and we'll talk about Ohio State. I ended up grading him for a lot of games, but we'll talk about the Ohio State game specifically. We're going to try to get him on the show. He ended up saying he's going to come on in the postseason. Super hyped for that, but let's see what happens here. Start out with Ohio State because those are the best receivers he's faced. Excellent break on the wide receiver and a good tackle. He's definitely punchy in terms of acceleration. Can seem to ride a wide receiver's waist downfield. Can maintain speed with wide receiver and even jog when they run. Really solid stance and movement skills. He has a hard time with a 270-degree turn from a blind spot. So that's something I noticed a lot. This is something that will pop up a lot in my notes. He's going to be running, so let's say wide receiver's running like this. He's running with them. First off, I think his shoulders are pointed way too far north. But he's essentially pointed away from the wide receiver to where his shoulder, his left shoulder, is where the wide receiver is. And then when they cut, he has a really hard time shifting, turning, and coming back. But that's his one area where the change of direction is not good. And I just don't understand why he does that, but I feel like that's something that could be easily corrected in the NFL, but let's get back to it. He has a good top speed for sure. He's very calm and composed. The only issue so far is that he's been that has been that 270-degree blind spot turn, which I don't get because he's very fast and does not need to have his shoulders pointed so far upfield. Thank you, Alex, for saying that, for supporting my analysis there. His eyes are always on the quarterback. Unreal recovery speed. He let a wide receiver pass deep that should have been a touchdown, but he bailed on it to cover on a shorter route. He got beat on a double move, has not been helped out at all by the safety who just sat there and then could not make up the ground, lost. He ended up losing. He did not get helped at all by the safety who just sat there and could not make up the ground, lost. Bad play regardless in man coverage. 270-degree turn, mess up again, leading to a comeback route that was wide open. I see him jogging a little too much now for my liking, and he ended up being pulled because the score got too big. So, I ended up seeing that his explosiveness was not necessarily as punchy as I was expecting. That's why his athleticism's at a B-, but also you'll see not many players have that athleticism score. Like, he is, like, top speed-wise, really, really good. But I could see him improving that category. This dude's a baller regardless. Really, really good player. Continuing on, we got Trey Amos. I mean, we're talking about corner twos right now, like guys who should be taking every rep. Keep that in mind. So Jamari Harris is one. But regardless, I think Jamari Harris could be like a superstar if used properly. But versus Kentucky, he did really well versus LSU. Let's see why he struggled versus Kentucky. He's right on Arden Key's hip with a pass breakup. Seems much less willing to help versus the run than some other corners. His steps feel very heavy. Great job keeping his hands on the receiver without being overwhelming. He's been thrown off twice now. His nice red zone defense on a deep fade, swiping at arms and hands. Change of direction might be an issue north-south, but acceleration appears to be there. He's usually a bit delayed on reacting to the run. Just a massive dude. I honestly thought he was like 6'1", 210. Like, he plays like a very massive corner. He's unbelievable at the catch point. The dude is just a pass breakup machine. And then I said there was a bullshit PI call on him. It ended up saying the next line, there was a bullshit PI call on nearly perfect defense. Touchdown allowed due to early separation on a drag route. Somehow did get his hand in there still to contest it. He did identify a developing route across the field. Due to his heavy feet, his acceleration is more limited than I want to admit, but he can build up speed well and has long arms. All these passes caught on him are contested. I've never seen a corner with this little separation at the catch point, especially with his athletic profile. It's just so weird because the acceleration is not great. The change of direction is not great, but the dude's always at the catch point somehow. Like, I just don't get it. So, honestly, a fantastic job by Trey Amos. I mean, having a little bit of an early, slow start, but especially when you do well versus LSU, that's usually a good sign that you're a good corner. And Trey Amos is absolutely warranted of the hype. Then Jabbar Muhammad's next. This guy doesn't get a lot of love, but I'm going to give it to him. I think this guy's awesome. So let's talk about him versus Ohio State. He's nice off the bat, very willing and eager to step up and play the run. Acceleration's not uber ideal, but it's far from bad. He gets siloed in on his sky. Great job transitioning in a flat zone. He's playing both sides of the field. Single-handedly defended a touchdown scramble. Change of direction's a bit stiff on super hard transitions from back to forward, but maybe not his acceleration. His identification of a check down and bailed on his coverage to end up stopping it. He seals the edge. And I said, yeah, that back to forward change of direction, north to south, is really bad. But besides that, side to side change of direction is great. It's just in that one direction. He ended up being beat by Smith with his speed for a contested catch. Out route, but good job contesting it with a great throw. Nasty off man when he sits and shoots from a deeper position and not backpedaling. Excellent break and pass breakup on a comeback. I ended up posting that next as well. So Jabbar's like really, really up and down. I mean, to me, he's super sticky. I ended up kind of comping him to what we see in the NFL with why am I forgetting his name on the Packers? But Zaire Alexander, like just smaller but still extremely physical, very punchy, fluid. It's like literally Jabbar's not great in just one direction of change of direction. And besides that, I mean, he still is someone who's very explosive out of his break, etc. So I think he gets a little bit of the short end of the stick. Jabbar Muhammad, still a really great player. This is someone who, unfortunately, I believe might be out for the year with an MCL, but it was like literally last week. Preston Hodge. I mean, shout out to my homie who literally for like 19 days straight ended up asking for me to grade Preston Hodge. And he's the slot corner, but he actually has played some boundary reps, which is why I'm including him in this. I really think he's very similar to Jarvis Brownlee. like one of the few guys that you've seen with an actual comparison. I'll take time more and more as the offseason goes on and try to make more comparisons, but I really do want to make sure that at least I end up giving you guys honest feedback. But this is my guy. Obviously, he's up at 6 above a lot of the other guys that people like more. But let me read my stats, or let me read my notes versus Arizona here. I ended up starting out. This is the first game I watched of him. I'm doing this dude a solid if the stats indicate anything. So this is my actual thoughts. Second lowest yards allowed in the game this year, and he's in the slot. So I actually ended up watching the game where he ended up allowing the most yards as well, and I actually really liked it. But he feels very on sale. Castro ended up being better than Castro, in my opinion, based on his ability to play the outside. But seems to run in quicksand, trying to accelerate. High motor, great job with physicality, keeping close to the wide receiver. Bit on a play action, drifted back, trying to cover a route that was not there. Definitely looks the part, but I don't know if it's much more than show than tell. That's in zone. Can give separation if he opens up his hips late due to a slower acceleration. Much better than what the stats say. Top speed appears to be there and is really that short area quickness. Very Sebastian Castro-esque. Tried jumping a bubble screen, but the play ended up being a mesh concept. Got lucky. It was not a big gain. Jarvis Brownlee-esque as well. Sealed the edge, forcing the ball carry upfield. Main area of improvement is that short area quickness. I can tell he is still developing as a zone corner, but he definitely has the foundation to improve. Change of direction's honestly very solid. Subbed out, overall great performance. But like, I ended up loving his game versus a lot of other teams as well. This dude ended up playing boundary reps as well on versus, I believe, was it UCF? Or Kansas State. Kansas State was the other game I graded for him, and I'm not going to pull up that right now, but he actually ended up playing on the other side as DJ McKinney, because I think that was a game where we did not have Travis Hunter. So it was great to see him. He actually played really well on the boundary, and just overall, I really ended up liking Preston Hodge. I really did. The notes didn't really seem like it, but I started out with such a negative bias that I was essentially doing my homie a favor by grading this guy. And, shout out to you, dude. Shout out to you. But let's continue on with this. Davison Igbinosun's next. Dude's a baller. You guys know he's been one of my top corners since the beginning. Let's talk about his game versus Marshall. So when I graded it, it was his most translatable game, and it was also his worst game. So he stuck to the hip in press coverage. He just blew up a swing route. He likes to hit. He allowed one catch. It was actually an insane catch as well. I remember seeing that. The wide receiver just ended up having a glue hand catch. He needs to watch being too physical on double moves. He can get holding calls. I don't know how great he is in zone. Very little of it, but he's a very sure tackler. I feel like he needs to be I feel like he does need to end up being a boundary. He has a bit more indecisiveness in the slot. He ended up being subbed out due to being up so much. But something else I watched for Iggy, and I ended up noting this as well, he was in off coverage a lot, and that's where he struggled the most. That's where he ended up allowing the most yards. And so I really didn't appreciate that, but that's why his man coverage grade is so much lower. I really think that when it comes down to locking up receivers, like, there's not many that can stonewall one the way Davison Igbinosun can. So I really do like that. I do think that he's not necessarily the craziest athlete, and I think that's why he suffers in off man, But Davison Igbinosun still one of the dark horse players in this class. You guys know this has been my guy since the beginning. Azariah Thomas, ended up talking about him since the beginning, was like, oh, well, he played 500 reps last year, but he never started, right? Except for that bowl game. And he did well in the bowl game too. But this year he's been doing fantastic, and finally he's starting to get that first round hype. So he can end up, let's talk about his game versus Miami. He can pick up some speed, good physicality, a little early, but nice defense on a slant. Needs to keep his feet moving laterally. Consistently is running. So that's something I look for is, are you like jogging on certain plays? Because I just like having corners with good motors. He bailed a little too quickly on a broken play. Good tackle versus the run. Missed an open field tackle. He can get turned around a bit. He breaks on the ball pretty early and off coverage, not getting outran by anybody. Good use of physicality to push the wide receiver out of bounds when they tried to reroute. Bailed on coverage to end up stopping a scramble. Really solid movement skills. I would say that the change of direction could slightly improve. It is the second change of direction that could improve, not the first. So basically, if there's two different changes of direction, he does have a little bit of an issue there. Deep zig completion when he ended up trying to, he ended up trying to jump a slant. Late double move ended up getting him no running away from him at all. He ends up looking at the ball. Overall is definitely a star that still needs more polish. So he's getting there. As you can tell, the coverage grade doesn't relate to the athleticism, physicality, etc. But that's something that's beautiful. The fact that you're buying low on a player that should be, like, if this were his final form, he'd still be a top end corner too in the NFL. I thoroughly believe that this guy could accelerate and end up being one of the best corners in the NFL. Travis Hunter's next. I know this is going to piss some people off, but it is what it is. Let's talk about his worst game versus Kansas State. And I love Travis Hunter. I mean, as you can see, I have very good grades on him. I don't think he's a top-end athlete. I don't think he's ever really shown up as a top-end athlete. It's why he does have a lot of contested catches even as a receiver. I think that he's a very fluid athlete. And I think he's more fluid as a receiver than he is as a corner. I think there's certain areas where I think he could be a little bit better. But his instincts are through the roof. I think he's really, really solid. But it was his worst game, and he ended up getting hurt in it. But I still want to be able to talk about it because we've talked about so many other Kansas State games for corners. Off the bat, he allowed a slant. He had smooth change of direction, had a nice acceleration, but the wide receiver did not yield the separation. In other words, he didn't have the top speed necessarily. He ends up showing physicality. Poor tracking leads to a missed tackle. He bit on a double move, and he does not have the top speed to make up the separation. Ended up being hurt. So I do think there's certain areas that Travis Hunter can improve. Some people think he's the best player that they've seen. I'm not there, but I still think he's really fucking good, right? I mean, 77.75. We're talking about players I am unbelievably a huge fan of, like Azariah Thomas. And yeah, the +4 it factor certainly helps. Technically, it's a net +2 because I do think that, Travis Hunter has had those games where he gets absolutely cooked. And so I think it's still worth it to mention that. And I still think there's certain reps where he doesn't go full effort because he's trying to maintain that effort, or maintain that stamina. But Travis Hunter certainly is a fantastic player. I think that he's going to be a really, really good corner in the NFL if he ends up choosing to be that. I think he's a better corner than he is as a wide receiver, but we'll leave it there. I think Travis Hunter's a really good player, though. This is not to shade Travis Hunter. It's just I really love Ben Morrison. He's out for the year. I think he should return. But let's talk about his game versus Louisville. I think this is the game where he ended up being hurt as well. Louisville's a really good school. Like, if I end up seeing corners go versus Louisville, I end up watching that as well. So he had a solid seal on the edge. He wouldn't mind trying to be a little bit more physical on the seal, though. Nice tight coverage, excellent coverage on a streak. Might have shown a very slightly limited top speed, though. Of course, he's going against Ja'Cory Brooks, who has a really good top speed. First catch, he let up because he fell when he was pressing. Looks back at the quarterback during the play. Can get himself out of position when he does try to punch at the line of scrimmage pretty hard. I said he ended up biting hard on the quarterback keep and ended up leading to a big gain on his side. He ended up doing it again. I wonder if they're told to be able to go after the quarterback when they end up when they're doing an option. I ended up questioning whether it was pretty much play the quarterback rather than play the running back. I don't know. He got stuck on a double move, guessing it was a double move streak for a big gain over the middle that ended up being dropped in an interception. So he ended up getting bailed out because he thought it was a double move go and it ended up being a post. So, trying to outsmart the play doesn't end up always really going well. And it can end up being beautiful if you get it right, but it's a very nuanced thing. He does not handle wide receivers on his back well in the blind spot. He guessed on a shorter route and then had to bail and haul ass for a blown deep coverage and then ended up being hurt. But, Ben Morrison, bottom line, he's somebody that has just been so consistent, plays the number one receiver for multiple years. He's unbelievably physical for his size. And I think that there's just not many corners that I think we've got prospect fatigue. That's the bottom line. I think it's just big time prospect fatigue for these top corners. And Travis Hunter enamors everybody. And it's because, Colorado's doing a good job of marketing them more than these other schools are marketing their guys. And shout out to Colorado for doing that. But Ben Morrison, I think, will end up probably coming out. I don't think he should, but I do think that if he does come out, he still will go first. Then let's talk about Will Johnson, the alien. I love him to death. He's been dealing with some injuries this year, though. That's why his athleticism dropped. But let's talk about his game versus Washington. I said off the bat, I really do love him. He ended up getting trucked by Jonah Coleman twice. Unreal lockdown rep, great use of his physicality. He feels the whole play developing. Excellent off coverage on a slant, great track on a jet sweep. Recovery speed's okay. Acceleration when already in motion's not great, hence why recovery speed is also not really there. Pass interference should have just tracked the ball rather than hitting the receiver. Definitely has some things he can work on, but extremely few. And I really just think that it was the fact that, he's probably trying to compensate for having some injuries this year. That's why he's ending up having some struggles. But I do think he ends up going top 10. I think he should end up going top 3. But he's my number 1 player in the class, and I really do think he is on that legitimate top tier, top 3 corner in the NFL coming in day 1 type of conversation. I think he's awesome, and I think you're awesome if you actually made it this far. I love you guys. I mean, you guys know how passionate I am about corners, and this was a video I've been really dying to make, so I'm excited that we were able to do it. On to the next position. Probably, if we have the right amount of tape, we'll go into wide receivers. I don't know if I'll do all 57 or 60 that I have right now, because there's certain players that just haven't earned the right to be mentioned, but we'll see about it. I love you. See you on the far side. Peace.